Hey, my name is Kara. I'm an ultrasound tech, and let's talk today about my own personal experience with having abnormal nuchal scans with both of my pregnancies. So, I did do a video about this on my YouTube channel, but I kind of figure I might as well put it on this channel as well, just in case anyone else is going through something similar, just to document my own experience, as well as hopefully give whoever is going through this as well some hope that things can turn out okay. Now, for those of you that don't know what a nuchal translucency ultrasound is, the long story short of it, which again, I do have videos on my channel too if you want to know more, but long story short, it is a genetic screening test that we do at around 12 weeks, and we are measuring the fluid at the back of baby's neck. Anything over 3 millimeters at the clinic that I work at, anyways, is considered abnormal. And if you are over 3.5 millimeters, that means it is an automatic referral to maternal fetal medicine, or in other words, the high risk pregnancy clinic. And basically, that fluid at the back of baby's neck that we are measuring at 12 weeks, we need to combine the risk factor of that as well as the blood work that you get the same day. And that blood work is going to be looking at certain factors in the maternal blood just to see if anything is elevated or even decreased that would lead to a diagnosis of having a higher chance of chromosomal abnormalities. And then the third factor that we have to take into account is the patient's background risk. So essentially, those three things are going to be combined, and it is going to give you a risk factor of whether or not baby is going to have a chromosomal abnormality. This is not to be confused with a CVS or an amniocentesis that actually looks at baby's DNA and gives you a definitive answer as to whether or not there is a chromosomal abnormality going on. But the nuchal translucency test is just a part of a screening test that determines whether or not your risk is increased. Other tests that do this include the NIPT test, or the non-invasive prenatal testing, goes under like different trade names like Harmony, or things like the quad screen that will basically tell you if baby has an increased risk of having a genetic abnormality. So let's get to my personal experience. With both of my pregnancies, I had abnormal NTs with both. My first pregnancy, I believe her NT was at 4.7 millimeters. So again, anything over 3 is abnormal. So 4.7 is very abnormal. And then for our second, I believe her NT was at 3.8, I want to say. So again, abnormal. And a little bit of background on us. I believe we were 25 when we had our first, and then it was 27, 28 when we had our second. And there is no background history on either of us or on either side of our families for a genetic abnormality being present anywhere. So needless to say, when we had the abnormal NT with our first pregnancy, that was a huge surprise, let alone having it happen again with our second pregnancy. And I remember my husband asking me when I was going in for my nuchal scan at the clinic that I worked at, if it was important for him to come along to this one since he had already come to the dating scan. And I was like, oh no, it's fine. Everything should be fine. Don't worry about it. You don't need to come in. And one of my coworkers was scanning me, so my friend was scanning me. And I remember her getting really quiet and being like, okay, I need to go talk to the radiologist. But just kind of as a heads up, since again, we work together, you know what's going on when I have to go grab the radiologist. Something looks abnormal. And at that time, I was like, okay, well, no worries. Okay, it should be fine. But then the radiologist comes in, and both of them are looking at baby and just seeing how much fluid was at the back of her neck. And again, it was 4.7, which at the time I did not do nuchal translucency scans, but I knew that that was very abnormal just from the little that we learned in school. And from there, it was a big whirlwind of having to get obviously that blood work. And then we got referred to MFM, which is the high risk hospital that is around here, is where we went to. And we opted for a CVS, as in we opted for invasive genetic testing to be able to see if baby actually had a genetic abnormality. Luckily, I think my blood work did bring my risk down. Although, again, my increased NT did get that automatic referral to MFM. And we did opt for the CVS, and that is where a needle is actually inserted through the cervix. In my case, anyways, I think it can be done through the abdomen. But anyways, the needle goes in through the cervix to get some of the fetal DNA cells, and then that is analyzed. I remember getting the call from the genetic counselor, I think like 4 or 5 days after the procedure, and it was so nerve-wracking, but they said everything was genetically normal on baby. And as a little side note, we wouldn't have done anything to not keep the baby if there was anything up with the chromosomes. But at the same time, it was our first pregnancy. I feel like we wanted to be really cautious about everything, as well as I am a big planner. So if there was a genetic abnormality or any sort of structural abnormalities, I would want to know about it just so that we can be prepared at delivery for any sort of complications that would already be present on baby. Anyway, so the genetics came back clear, but we still had to go to MFM for our fetal echo as well as for our anatomy scan because babies with increased NTs, even if they don't have a genetic abnormality, there is still an increased chance that there could be heart abnormalities. So that's why we had to go for the fetal echo as well as the anatomy scan. And then we had a couple more scans, I think one later on the second trimester, and then a few in the third trimester just to check on baby's growth. But in the end, we delivered a healthy baby girl. And there has been nothing that has come of that thickened nuchal translucency at 12 weeks from that scan. As in, we don't see any delays. There has been no indication that that even happened. And it was so stressful during the pregnancy, but I still think that it was worth it to be able to at least get that screening done. And then I guess get the peace of mind that there was actually indeed nothing wrong, even though her nuchal was super abnormal. And basically, same story for our second baby. So her nuchal was a little bit less abnormal. It was 3.8, but again, still abnormal in the whole grand scheme of things. And the story was basically the same as with our first, except I remember I was going in for the CVS and they didn't get enough fetal cells, so we had to go in a second time. But by that time, we were already too big to be able to do the CVS, so we actually had to do the amniocentesis, which is where they go in through your abdomen to get the fetal cells. And I remember that one was super nerve-wracking because the rad that was doing it was like, yeah, I don't use any sort of numbing because I think it actually makes it worse that I have to jab you 2 times, so we're just going to go ahead and do this without any numbing. But it actually wasn't too bad. Anyways, long story short, for our second pregnancy, we went through all the same testing and genetics came back normal. We had to go do the fetal echo and the anatomy scan. All of that came back normal as well. And so did all the other scans. And same as with our first one, our second baby was born healthy. There have been no complications or no delays that we can see so far. And they are 3 and 5 respectively now. And this is not to say that this is going to be the case for everyone, obviously, who has an increased nuchal translucency, but we have to remember that all of these are just screening tools that we are using, as in anything that's non-invasive. So if you're not getting the CVS and you're not getting the amnio done, you actually don't know for sure because we are not looking at baby's DNA as to whether or not there is a chromosomal abnormality present. Your risk factors and the increased nuchal translucency can definitely err towards the side of, okay, there's probably something wrong genetically, or that you do have a very increased risk. But at the same time, it is not going to be 100% sure or 100% determined until you go in for more invasive testing that actually looks at the DNA. And in my case, even though they were false positives and they caused a lot of stress and a lot of extra testing, as well as invasive testing during both of the pregnancies, I still would opt to have it done if I had to do it all over again. But again, that is just my personal decision and my personal opinion. And I hope this video does provide some insight into the screening tests that we use and the fact that they are not perfect, but also some comfort if you happen to have any sort of abnormal results that came back from a screening. It doesn't actually mean that there is a chromosomal abnormality present with baby. And if you guys have any questions about my own personal experience with this, just leave them in the comments below. I'll try to answer them.